Hello, my name's Danielle and welcome to my channel. Today I want to show you how I put together this simple and design hello greeting card. It has a little bit of Copic coloring and a little bit of ink blending. I start off with my A2 size standard card base. It's 110-pound Nina cardstock. I have two layers to the card. The top layer I'm using to stamp my image, and then the red layer I use as a border, and I'll put all the dimensions in the description below. I have the Waffle Flowers Big Dots sentiment set. I'm going to be using the hello sentiment from that set. Stamp Anniething, Abigail, glad we're friends. That's going to be my focal point. I have Versamark ink. When I do my embossing, I do my ink blending with Distress Ink Hickory Smoke and the Linen White embossing powder. That's from Inkadinkado. I use my ink blender, and I have a stencil from My Favorite Things. It's the Chevron grid stencil, and that's what I use. So I saturate my stamp. I have it on an acrylic block. I saturate it with Memento Tuxedo black ink. Normally I would use my Misty, but I just re-inked this stamp pad, so it's pretty juicy. So I make my impression, and I kind of fast forward through some of this. I think I'm gonna speed this up a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure I get good coverage, so I kind of lean into it, and I have a pretty good image there. I'm gonna start doing some coloring. Now in the beginning I just realized I mentioned Copic coloring, but I do use I am using Copic color markers for her dress, but for the rest of the image, her hair, her bows, and her face, I'm using, I think it's Studio, I'm trying to read it on the screen as I go. It's some cheap markers I bought. I'll put them in the description below. They were like $9.99 for like a set of 6 or something. It's the skin tone set. And then I show you my Copic markers as well. So this one is the Mocha 329. Again, I'll just put all of this in the description box. So I kind of just showing you my ink blending here. I had every intention to do a little ink blending, but I'm still new at Copic coloring. After all these years, I'm still new. My skill set isn't that great. So depending upon what the image is and what I'm doing, or what part of the image I'm coloring, I normally opt to just cover it with just one color. There's little ink blending going on her face and skin. I do a little bit of that on her dress. Now, as I'm coloring the dress here, I just want to share that when I was uploading the video to my Mac, I realized that when I was coloring her hair, some of the video was corrupted. So I think I cleverly put that in there, as far as you'll see that I go through all of this process of doing her dress, and then magically her hair will be colored. The only ink blending I'm doing with the Copic markers is on her dress, and I usually do a little bit of shading. So I start with the darkest color, the lightest, well, no, sorry. I kind of go back and forth because I've found a few YouTubers, and I just try to follow their method of coloring. Here, how I start is I do the lightest tone first on the entire image. I do the edges using my darkest tone. I come back around with the medium tone, kind of pulling that dark color out towards the middle, and then I go over it again with my lightest tone. And yeah, that's pretty simple. but I'm still working on my Copic coloring. I hope to take a few classes just to get better at it, and nothing's better than practicing, so I plan to do that. And I think here, or shortly, I'm using my ink blender here because some of the colors saturate the stamp image so much it kind of bleeds. So I kind of use my ink blender, or yeah, my blenderless, is it blenderless marker, to push that ink back within the lines there. And now here's where the magic of the internet appears. She's all finished. I got her hair color, her bows, and all of that. So I think now I'm going to get into the ink blending. So I cut out a mask of the image, and so I'm going to cover her with the masking there, and then I'm going to overlay the image with my stencil and just do a light touch. I have a light touch with blending the distress ink, and I intentionally offset the image because I want it like in the lower third of the paper there. So I do light ink blending. I'm going to secure the stencil using just a little bit of masking tape. I recycle a lot of stuff depending upon how much ink I get on it. Try not to waste, recycle. I'm going to get my ink blender, and ever since I've gotten these blender brushes, I find myself utilizing my distress ink more and more. I have a few of the distress oxide inks, but years ago I bought a lot of I think I have almost all of the distress ink colors. So these blender brushes really have made ink blending a lot easier to me. Using those little round things. Well, I initially started with those little square blender block things, and then the round ones, the mini ones. I never could get a good blend, but since I've discovered these brushes, it's great. So I finished up my ink blending. I'm wiping off my desktop there to get all of the excess. I try my best, because I'm good for smudging, making smudges. So I try my best to use my little tweezers there, to remove the mask, and voila. And the blending is very subtle. When I show you the pictures later on, you'll see, or get a close-up of the card, you'll see how subtle that is. And I like that. I like a faint stencil there. That little oval die cut, initially I thought I was going to fussy cut her out and put her, just lift her, raise her using dimensionals on top of the card, so I was going to have that little shadow, but I decided to just color right on that layer. I'm going to adhere that top layer to the red layer to make the border, and then I eventually use that, not use it, but I adhere that whole piece onto the card base. The hello sentiment, I'm going to heat emboss that sentiment with that linen white powder. So I used my Versamark ink, stamped up the image. I'm using a little black piece of cardstock, and I think they call it, oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thought here. That resists, that powder to keep the ink from going all over the place. So I use that. Anyway, I stamped the image with my embossing ink, putting on the powder. I'm now gonna heat set it, And normally when I heat set, over the years I found that if I do the back of the card, that prevents it from flying all over the place. I don't know, I've never had luck starting on the top because I always feel like my ink flies and I have little pieces here and there. So I heat embossed it, I cut it down to the size I wanted to put on the image. I'm now adhering that to the card base. Oh, and I forgot to mention in that last place when I originally put that top image on when I originally added the red layer, it was kind of off center, so off camera I cut it down to make all sides even. And I think that's about an eighth of a border on each, or excuse me, eighth of an inch border on each layer. So I decide where I'm going to put the image. I'm going to use my T-ruler a little bit just to ensure that the sentiment is straight. If you look at a lot of my cards on my Instagram account, and hopefully as I build over time, I'm not good at eyeballing. And every time I eyeball, I swear to you, the image is always crooked. So I'm making an attempt to have a straight image there. And that's pretty much the card. You have to tell me what you think. Oh, of course, I forget that I'm adding a little bit of bling there. So I use my Winkostella pen and I'm putting a little sparkle all over her dress and her hair bows. I think I'm going to follow that up with glossy accents. I just put it on her hair bows, and then I think I put it on her tongue. I colored her tongue pink. I think I used R22 COPIC marker, R22, yeah. So I put the glossy accents on her hair bows and a little bit on her tongue, and now that is it. I think the card is pretty cute. You have to let me know what you think. Leave me a comment below. I'm always interested in constructive criticism, and some positive feedback always helps. And I appreciate you joining me. Thanks for watching.